Afternoon, and
Clark.
welcome to Bill Cobbs on the record. Some interesting things have been happening over the last few days. One of those things is the failure of two banks across this country. And I think they opened the door for us to have a conversation today about something that I think is really important for our community. And that thing that we're going to start off our conversation with today is how we manage to move beyond the situation that we came to this country in. So we're going to call this a lesson for my people. Uh, we were the product of centuries of human bondage. 1865 only changed the nature of that bondage. It did not set us free. There is very little difference between human bondage and economic bondage. And we need to understand how we go about the business of breaking the economic bounds that keep us uh, scraping every single day. Today, we're caught up in a system that squeezes the economic life out of us because we fail to understand the nature of it. We're going to talk about one of the aspects of that economic monster today, and that's credit cards. And I want you to be prepared after this to sit down with your young people and begin to help them to understand the insidious nature of how banks and credit card companies continue to keep them in a kind of bondage because of the way they operate. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something before we start because it's important that you really see and comprehend uh, the nature of what's happening. So I'm going to ask you to run and go grab the last statement you got from your credit card company and bring it back and open it in front of you. And while you're out there, I want you to grab a notebook and a piece of paper that you can write some things down on because, you know, I don't know about you, but I don't always remember everything that I talk about. But if I write things down, it's easy for me to come back to them later and reprocess them. So the history of credit cards in America was that they were developed by supposedly increase consumer convenience. Now think about that, consumer convenience. Uh, that implies that they were for your benefit, but they really weren't for your benefit. What they were for was to encourage people to spend more money than they had, like the old plantations and old work farms stores. They were designed to get you to spend and put yourself in debt to the extent that you could never get out. And I'm going to show you how to change that and break the cycle of the credit card trap. Society is structured to force you into the credit card trap no matter whether you want to be part of it or not. You can't rent a car or go to a hotel without a credit card. The system creates a need and you have to have one. You can beat the system, but it requires discipline and knowledge. And what we're going to share this afternoon is discipline and knowledge. Now, at some point during this conversation, former Mayor Karen Williams Weaver will be joining me because this really does tie into the program that she does about Black Money Matters. This is how you refine your understanding of black money matters and make the system work for you. So let's talk about this now. The system creates a need, and you respond to it by applying for a credit card. But most of us, because we are not sophisticated about money, don't have the discipline or knowledge to begin to use that tool effectively. Discipline means that you don't use them for crazy spontaneous purchases. You don't, under any circumstances, carry them in your wallet. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. People get credit cards, and for some strange reason, they think that the best place for that credit card is in their wallet, and that's the least place, last place you want to have it, because if you have the credit card in your wallet, you're going to always be tempted to make purchases with it that aren't the best kind of purchases. You know, I can remember a time when my son was away at college, and he was using his credit card at McDonald's and restaurants and stuff like that, not understanding that, you know, whether it's a $10 purchase or $100 purchase, once you make it, you have a liability for interest, and it's crazy that anybody would be paying any kind of interest rate on a $5 Happy Meal or something like that. Once you break the habit of carrying credit cards with you, and it's a habit you have to break, because you know if you have a credit card, it will encourage you to make spontaneous, ridiculous purchases. And I want to give you I want to help you to understand this. Uh, you should never, ever, under any circumstances, be using a credit card to purchase anything that you will use up before you pay off the balance. And I always say to people that if you go out and you see something that you need, not something you want, something you need, you should figure out how you can pay for it in 12 months or less. Because the longer you carry that credit card balance, the bigger the hole gets. Um, I asked you to pull out a credit card statement because I want you to take a look at it. On that statement, you'll see a portion that talks about how long you will pay if you just pay the minimum every single month. And that's important because that's the trap that most people fall into. They get into the habit of only paying the credit card minimum every month, and they figure that because they're doing that everything is okay. But in the fine print, now I want you to look at the fine print. The fine print says that if you pay the monthly minimum, it will take you, depending on how much you owe, 10 years to pay it off. So if it takes you 10 years to pay off $1,000 because you were paying $29 a month, I want you to do the math and decide how much interest you paid for that purchase that you had to have that you didn't pay for in a timely manner. We got a question. Gloria Campbell just asked, how do you decide what credit card to go with? So Gloria, we're going to talk about that, but because there's a way to beat the system, and part of what we want to make people aware of this afternoon is how you get yourself in a position where you can literally uh, get credit cards, use them, and avoid paying any interest. Yeah, but Derek, it really doesn't matter because the goal should be Derek Smart just said that credit cards have a due date and a statement date, and they're two different things. It really doesn't matter because your goal as a consumer should always be to do something that none of us do most of the time. You know, I always advise people that when you have a outstanding balance on a credit card, you know, the system uses algorithms to decide what kind of payer you are. And I tell people that whatever amount they're going to pay each month, they should take that amount and split it in two and do one portion every 2 weeks so that it looks like the company to the credit card company they're receiving two payments a month rather than one. That will immediately start to have an impact on your credit score and help you to score uh, higher in your numbers. The other thing is that uh, you know because credit cards make a lot of money for banks, they're very interested in having you have their credit card. Most of the banks run promotions where they are allowing people to do balance transfers. If they've got an existing credit card, they can apply for a new card with their company, transfer the balance, and not have any interest on that transfer for the first 12 months. Now that's a good thing if you manage it correctly. If you manage it correctly, you can dig yourself out of debt in a relatively controlled and timely manner. Because if you have the opportunity to transfer a credit card balance to a no interest account for 12 months, that should be when you really, really look at your highest interest bearing accounts and transfer them, and then you start to pay the debt down. You know, if you do the same thing that you were already doing, all you're doing is transferring the interest to somebody new. But if your payment is scheduled to be $50 and you pay $100, you'll find that if you owed $1,000 and instead of paying the $50, you paid $100 for 12 months. That's gone. It's wiped out. You got a clean record. So you want to do everything you can to keep it clean because that credit profile determines at what rate your any card that you get the interest will be. And right now, folks who over the last few years got variable rate interest credit cards are really starting to feel the pinch because with the Fed increasing interest rates 10 times over the last 12 months, they've seen the amount of interest that they're paying more than double. Now think about that. If you had a $1,000 balance or a $2,000 balance, and all of a sudden, your payment of $29 a month was, uh, $100 a month, and $75 of that was interest, you aren't even making a dent. You know, the bank is happy, but you're crying because the hole that you're in is so deep that you can't figure a way out of it. It's important that you learn to manage these debts because the bank doesn't the banks have determined that they don't really care whether you pay or not, because if you don't pay, what they're going to do is they're going to turn you over to a credit bureau and have them collect on you and really make your credit bad so that you can't get anything done. You know, you so if you are making sure that you're looking at credit card offers to see if you qualify for a balance transfer, and that balance transfer is for 12 months, leverage it. Leverage it for all that you can to make sure that you're paying down existing credit card debt, but you're also building up your credit worthiness so that when you decide to do something big like buy a house or buy a car, you're not getting charged a subprime interest rate. And let me explain what a subprime interest rate is. The
Okay.
credit card companies, when you apply, they take a lot of information from you. Where you work, how much you make, how long you've been there. Then they look at your credit record and see what your payment record is. Are you on time? Do you pay more than you need to pay? Are you a reliable debtor? And from that, they determine an interest rate. And that interest rate is usually variable, meaning it may start out at one percentage, and because of economic factors, over time it may end up significantly higher. If you read your credit card statement that I asked you to pull out, you will note that there's a section in there that talks about what happens if you have a late payment. Well, most people don't understand that the way that credit cards are set up today, if you have a late payment, not only can they charge you a late fee, but they can accelerate the interest rate. So your interest rate prior to being late may have been 17%. Now, because you made a late payment, even though you paid the late fee, it's accelerated to 29%. And paying 29% interest on anything in the past would have been considered usury, meaning that it was outrageous, that it was designed to keep you in the hole permanently. Um, Karen, are you with us now? Okay. Well, Karen either isn't able to respond yet, or they're still working on it. But let's talk about this some more. You know, the next thing is that credit scores are the thing that people look at, and your credit score impacts your ability to rent an apartment. It impacts your ability to get a car, to get a home. So you need to be religiously following what your credit score is, and you can do that when you sign up with a credit card company by asking to see your FICO score. And FICO scores range from a low of 300, which is in the hole, and nobody's going to give you credit with a 300 FICO score, to a maximum of 850. And ideally, you want to have your FICO score be in the high 600s to the mid 700s. That gives you the best kind of rate you can get. Um, the other thing that I
Okay,
think
take me
that
off
we
this
need to
thing because people gonna
discuss
see me having a
is the
fit.
fact that
Really.
people oftentimes will get themselves in a hole that they can't find a way to dig out of, and they will stop paying their credit card. And usually the credit card companies don't go through the collection process themselves. They actually sell the debt to someone else to collect, because you'll notice that on most of the agreements that you sign, It says that they can assign the debt to someone else by virtue of selling it. Now, when a debt gets assigned to a collection agency, the collection agency is paid pennies on the dollars for that debt because they've calculated that what the likelihood of being able to collect on it is. You need to know that in Michigan, credit cards have a life cycle of 6 years. What that means is that once you default, the debtor has 6 years to file a claim and start to collect on it. If the debtor fails to do that, the debt is considered to be lapsed. And the doctrine, I'm going to throw some legalese at you now. The doctrine of laches will prevent them from pursuing it legally. So if you haven't paid on it in 6 years and they haven't done anything to try and collect, and then they file a lawsuit, if they come after you, your defense for them coming after you is that they voluntarily allowed the debt to lapse. But I want to talk about some other intricacies that you need to be aware of. When a debt goes into collection, the collection agency will usually contact you. They will ask you to identify yourself. You are under no obligation whatsoever to give them any information. And I tell you this because the responsibility of proving that you actually owe money is theirs. It's not your obligation to prove that you don't owe it. They have to provide proof of debt. That proof of debt can be actual signed credit card slips. It can be in the form of a voice authorization. It can appear in a number of ways. But as a debtor, if you are pursued by a collection agency, you have the right to ask them to provide proof of debt. They must provide that proof of debt within 30 days. It must be provided to you in writing. You then have an opportunity to respond to it. Now, here's the interesting thing that most people don't know. Because collection agencies are a numbers game, they usually don't have proof of debt. They have a name of the alleged debtor, they have a telephone number, and anybody with that name in the area, they'll start calling to see if they're the person who actually owes the money. If you acknowledge that you are the debtor, then they got you. But if you say, well, I don't remember that account and I have no present recollection and I need proof of debt, you can force them to prove that you actually owe it. If they fail to do that, you can then approach the companies like Equifax and the credit reporting agencies and indicate that this is not your debt, that there was no proof of debt provided, and that you want any record of it on your file to be removed. And if the 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 debtor cannot provide adequate proof, it must be removed within 30 days. So you've got the opportunity to clear up old mess off your record before it becomes too detrimental to you to make a difference. And the reason we're talking about this is that if you look at who gets pursued most often by collection agencies in this country, almost 69% of the pursuits by collection agencies are against minorities and black folks. And that's because we don't understand how the system works. We don't understand that as onerous as it is, there are ways of fighting back and making sure that we are covered appropriately. Um, Karen, are you there? If you can't speak, just type me a message so I know you're still there. So in a nutshell, it's important that we are doing the right things to make sure that we aren't getting exploited by a system that was designed to exploit us, by a system that was not engineered to provide for our welfare and benefit, but for our continued economic demise. I think it's important that you understand that what happened in California and what happened out east regarding the bank failures was not an anomaly. It's a real view of what may be coming about. You know, I'm going to see if I can explain it to you so that it makes sense. The bank in California that went under Friday uh, had plenty of money. Well, let me correct it. They had plenty of assets, but those assets were tied up in loans and other things that they'd extended to their customers. And they had decided to try and hedge their bet against the Fed by buying treasury bonds at 1.5%. And at the time they did it, it made sense. But last year, when the Fed started to do the increases of basic interest rates by 75 basis points, uh, it created a situation that made them not have enough cash on hand for people who got nervous and decided they wanted to take their money out because the Fed rate on loans was 5%, and the interest rate that the bank was getting for its treasury bonds was 1.5%. It just didn't make sense. So they decided to sell off the treasury notes. When they sold those treasury notes off, it it set off a red light, and people decided to run. And you know, when when people get nervous about small and regional banks, they can set off an economic tsunami because uh, it upsets the equilibrium of the financial system. Um, Karen just wrote me a comment that I think everyone should be aware of. We should be teaching financial literacy in every school. We're not, and until then, we've got to teach it at home. We got to make sure that we are uh, filling the gap between the actual education that's available to our young people and what they receive. And I want to go back again and just emphasize that we've got to teach people to think differently. Because I had a conversation um, not too long ago with a young person that was pretty amazing to me. This young person was planning on taking a vacation, and they were going to take a vacation to Paris. And I was amazed because here's this 26-year-old kid, and they're going to Paris for 2 weeks. And you know, after sitting there, I finally had to ask. I says, "So, how are you? How are you paying for this?" And they said, "Well, I'm using my credit card." And I was blown away. I was blown away because this 26-year-old college graduate was going to go $10,000 in debt for a vacation that he was going to end up paying 29% interest on. Do the math. If you are paying that credit card company $200 a month to pay this debt down, and only $26 of that is going towards the principal, how many years is it going to take you to pay that debt off? Let me give you a clue. It's like more than 2 decades. So at 26, you took a vacation for 2 weeks that you're going to be paying for the next 20 plus years. That doesn't make sense. That's a feel good purchase that doesn't deliver anything to your economic security. Uh, and we need to make sure that we're teaching, financial responsibility in every place that our young people are, in our schools, in our homes, that the Board of Education is committed to making sure that we're giving our young people the right exposure. I would love to have you chime in and share your thoughts with me. Karen says it really is economic bondage. It absolutely is. It is a way of keeping you under the thumb forever, and you never figuring out how to dig out of it if you don't apply common sense. You know, I you know I marvel at the willingness of young people to go out and buy a car for $70,000 or $80,000 and pay for it for 8 years at crazy interest rates, and not understand that that will never ever uh, 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 set them free. And Karen says, well, what about these credit cards like Capital One that are supposed to be better if you have bad credit? Think about that. Why would anybody extend a credit card to someone with bad credit? Because they can charge them a higher interest rate, and because they know that eventually you're going to probably end up defaulting on that credit card. And so they charge you the maximum interest rate that they can because they want to get as much money out of you as they can while they can. So you know, if you're seeking a credit card, I wouldn't be looking for one at a financial institution that is, preying on on poor people to make a lot of money. Um, I would also think about whether or not it made sense to use a secured credit card. And in case you don't know what a secured credit card is, it's one of the ways that you can control your your spend and really begin to have a very disciplined approach to how you handle credit is to use a secured credit card. And what that means is that in order to get the credit card, you deposit $1,000 in the bank. That $1,000 is your security. So usually for $1,000 deposit, they will give you a $1,000 secured card. And what you're actually doing is using your money to establish a uh, credit history. And